Hello everyone, welcome to Sinister Prime. Since many of you listen to these stories to relax and drift off into dreams, I thought it would be wonderful to hear where you're tuning in from around the world. Let's begin the story. Halloween used to be my favorite time of year. There was something magical about how the world transformed for one night, when everything dark and eerie crawled out of the shadows and found its place in the light. It's funny how quickly something you love can turn into something you fear. And last year I learned the truth about Halloween. Not the fairy tale about costumes and candy, but the real darkness that lurks beneath the holiday's mask. This isn't one of those cheap horror stories you hear around a campfire. This is real. What happened to me? It'll stay with me forever. It started like any other Halloween night. I'd decorated my house just as I always did. Fake cobwebs hanging from the porch, a dozen jack-o'-lanterns flickering on the steps, and life-sized skeletons guarding the door. My neighborhood was known for having the best trick-or-treating in town. People came from miles around, and for years I took pride in being the house that went all out. But this year was different. This year, something had changed. There were whispers, rumors about the house at the end of the block, the old Pharaoh place. The house had been empty for years, ever since Old Man Pharaoh was found dead in his living room, his face frozen in an expression of terror. Nobody knew what happened to him, but the cops chalked it up to a heart attack. The neighborhood kids said it was haunted, but I'd never been one for ghost stories. Still, when I saw the house had been decorated for Halloween that year, I was surprised. No one had lived there in ages, and the idea of someone moving in without me noticing seemed impossible. I didn't think much of it at the time. Just another neighbor joining in the fun, I assumed. But the decorations, they were strange. Not your typical plastic tombstones or smiling skeletons. No, these were different. They were mannequins dressed in tattered clothes, posed in unnatural positions, their faces obscured by burlap sacks. Their limbs were contorted in ways that made my stomach turn, like they'd been twisted and broken deliberately. And the masks. Each mannequin wore a different mask. Some were smiling, others weeping, but they all felt wrong, too lifelike, too personal. I shook off the unease and went about my night, handing out candy to the endless stream of kids. It wasn't until later, when the streets had emptied and the trick-or-treaters were long gone, that things started to go wrong. I was sitting on the couch, mindlessly scrolling through my phone, when I heard it. A knock at the door. It was well past midnight, far too late for anyone to still be out trick-or-treating. But the knock came again, louder this time, more insistent. My heart rate quickened as I got up, unsure of what to expect. When I opened the door, there was no one there. No one except for a mask. It was lying on my front porch, face up, as if someone had deliberately placed it there for me to find. It wasn't like the cheap plastic masks you'd find in a Halloween store. No, this one was different. The material was porcelain, cracked and faded, with delicate features that resembled a human face far too closely. The eyes were hollow, the lips thin and twisted into a smile that was both inviting and sinister. It looked old, like something from a bygone era, maybe Victorian, something that had seen too much. For reasons I still can't explain, I picked it up. I felt a strange pull toward it, an urge to put it on. I knew it was stupid, but I couldn't resist. The moment the cold porcelain touched my skin, something shifted. The world around me seemed to grow darker, the air thicker, and an overwhelming sense of dread settled into my bones. It wasn't just fear. It was like the mask was alive, feeding on me. I tore it off, my heart racing, and threw it to the ground. But as soon as I did, the lights in my house flickered, and the temperature plummeted. My breath came out in short, visible puffs, and I felt her, the woman. She was standing in my hallway, her silhouette barely visible in the flickering light. She was tall, impossibly tall, her limbs too long, her movements jerky and unnatural, like a marionette with tangled strings. Her face was hidden in shadow, but I could feel her eyes on me, watching, waiting. I tried to move, but my legs wouldn't respond. I was paralyzed, trapped in my own body as she inched closer. The sound of her footsteps echoed through the hallway, each step a wet, sickening squelch, like she was walking through something that wasn't quite solid. When she finally stepped into the light, I saw her face, or rather, lack of a face. It was smooth, featureless, a blank expanse of pale, sickly skin stretched over a skull that was far too large, far too human to belong to anything alive. And yet, there she was, standing just inches from me, her breath cold against my neck. I don't know how I found the strength, but I broke free from the paralysis and ran. I didn't care where, as long as it was away from her. I fled into the night, barefoot, my pulse pounding in my ears. I didn't stop until I reached the Pharaoh house. Something drew me there, some invisible force that I couldn't resist. The front door was ajar, creaking in the wind, and from inside, I could hear the faint sound of music. It was an old record, playing a haunting, lilting melody that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere, all at once. Against every instinct I had, I stepped inside. The house was just as I remembered it, dark, decayed, forgotten. But the mannequins, they were different now. They weren't just standing around like decorations. They were alive, or at least, they seemed to be. Their heads turned in unison as I entered, their hollow eyes following my every movement. The masks they wore were no longer static. The smiles twitched, the frowns deepened. The weeping ones looked like they might actually start to cry. At the center of the room stood the woman. She was holding the mask, the one I'd found on my porch, and as I approached, she lifted it toward me. I tried to back away, but my body refused to move. I was rooted to the spot, helpless as she pressed the mask to my face. The moment it touched my skin, I was gone. I was no longer in my body. I was no longer me. I was inside the mask, inside her world, a world of darkness, of pain, of endless screaming. I saw flashes of faces, men, women, children, all of them wearing masks, all of them twisted and distorted by whatever horrors they had endured. They were trapped, just like me, their souls bound to the porcelain prisons that adorned their faces. I don't know how long I was in that place. Time didn't exist there. Minutes, hours, days, none of it mattered. All that mattered was the mask, and the woman, and the darkness. But somehow, I escaped. I don't remember how. One minute I was there, and the next I was standing in the middle of the street, the mask lying broken at my feet. The house behind me was burning, flames licking at the night sky, but there was no heat, no sound. Just silence. I ran. I didn't stop until I was miles away, far from the Pharaoh house, far from the mask. I thought I was free, but I was wrong. Every night since, I've seen her, the woman, standing at the foot of my bed, watching me with those empty eyes. And every night, I hear her whisper, "Come back." I can feel the pull getting stronger, the urge to return to that place, to put the mask back on. I've resisted so far, but I don't know how much longer I can hold out. I'm not alone anymore. She's with me now, always waiting, always watching. And when Halloween comes again, I know she'll take me back.